The Lieutenant Governor this morning in GMA said that this is the week we're going to roll on property tax reform. When will we have something we can read as far as assessment caps and that kind of stuff?
Well, in speaking with Representative Lindsay in the House, I know he is going to push forward again on H.R. 1. As far as the work I've done on reforming the assessment and appeals process, that is with Legislative Council now. I will tell you there's over 40 changes, but with respect to the members of the committee, I just finished that up on Friday. And what I'm doing is I have the list of the changes, which I'll be glad to give to you after I give to the members of the committee. And the only thing that's holding me up on that is that Senator Thompson wanted to know the origin of every single one of those changes or proposed changes. And so I'm actually going through the list. And I mean, literally some of them came from emails from people that didn't come to the committee meetings, and I'm having to match up who gave me the idea with the idea. And as soon as that list is produced, and it'll be either today or tomorrow, we'll give that out publicly. And that'll be before the legislation is even finished being drawn.
What do you feel about the tax cuts in general this session? You know, obviously the budget is in pretty dire shape, but yet we've also been hearing that there will be tax cut legislation moving forward. What would you support this session in the way of tax cuts, and how would you offset any drop in revenue?
Two hallmarks of a tax cut for the 2010 session will probably number one, is it directly tied to job creation? And if we can show that it's directly tied to job creation, I think it'll receive a favorable response. Number two is when does the impact of the state budget actually occur? So one of the things that's being talked about are, of course, reductions in taxation targeted areas, but that the credit would be given in some year in the future or tied to some sort of trigger mechanism is another thing I've heard about. You know, one of the problems we're facing now, of course, is the revenue shortfall reserve has gone down to almost zero. You may see legislation in the area of taxation that says we're going to reduce taxes when that revenue shortfall reserve gets back up to a certain level. I think that's some of the thoughts. So number one, tied directly to job creation. Number two, tied to ensuring that it happens at some point in the future when the economy is growing again.
Chip, the governor said that revenue, the rainy day trigger is one that he would take a look at. You know, as you know, he vetoed the measure that passed last year. Are you working with him on putting together a trigger like that, and do you have any problem with saying we won't enact that tax cut till the money's in the bank?
Don't have any problem. I mean, if we can promise that the tax cut is coming when the economy turns around, that's a good thing. We are working, Representative Graves and myself have already met with the governor to try to work on Jobs Bill 2, and we will be continually meeting with his staff. He is very open to doing something in this area. He, just like everybody, he understands the number one issue is clearly jobs, and he has shown some interest in having some sort of trigger mechanism, making sure that we have money in the bank before any of these tax credits begin to take place.
But do you understand his concern that with a balanced budget state, you can't take that early revenue hit and hope that eventually it'll be made up?
I understand that's his argument. I will say that, again, the biggest challenge we face in solving all of these problems is how do we grow the economy. So I don't think we can take anything off the table, but I do know that we need to make sure that if we're in this particular session, where we are with the budget, that if we are having targeted tax cuts, that we can show that there's some significant job growth directly tied to those tax reductions.
H.R. 1 would still be a constitutional amendment that would require 2/3, right?
H.R. 1, yes, would be a constitutional amendment.
Where do you guys stand on ethics reform? The House is having a big hearing this afternoon, and you know there's a lot of talk of a lobbyist gift cap. Do you see that coming through this session?
Well, one thing is for certain when we start talking about ethics, and that is that at the end of the day, if it's viewed as a Republican bill or a Democrat bill, the public's not going to put much faith in it. You know, we passed ethics reform a few years ago, and I believe we moved up into the top 10 states in the country in some system that grades states on ethics laws, and I believe we're in the top 10. That was a good move. I have long suggested that in this area of ethics, instead of making it a partisan issue, that we have some sort of outside group say, look, we have looked at all 50 states, we know what works, we know what doesn't work, here's what you guys need to do, and then present that to the legislature. I think that is the way that the public can have some sort of faith in what we're doing. I think if you get into a partisan battle, Democrats against Republicans, on ethics, nobody wins, and nobody believes that you've really accomplished that much. So hopefully we'll have some sort of outside agency that can look at this. Do caps work? If they work, we need to do it. If they don't work, we don't need to do it. So one way or the other, we need to figure out what works, what doesn't work. At the end of the day, I've always been a big proponent that the best way to solve ethics, of course, is to have complete and full disclosure and let the voters decide, because ultimately they need to make the decision.
I was talking to Rusty Kidd, not last week, but the week before. He's new in the House and is a longtime lobbyist. And he said that not a day goes by that some sort of lobbying is done that is below the table, that is never disclosed, or that, you know, a person lobbies who is not registered as a lobbyist. In your experience, is that assessment correct, that is that rampant?
Tell me again what he said, I apologize.
That either a lobbyist takes a representative or a senator to a meal that is never disclosed, or someone who is never registered as a lobbyist gives a gift or takes someone to a meal, or engages in some other form of.
I don't believe that happens on an everyday basis. But I'll give you an example. I mean, this is where things, you know, and I never thought about this until recently because this issue has come to the forefront. But I remember I walked into my office last week and somebody had placed a hat on my desk, and it was a camouflage hat. And I don't wear a lot of hats anyway, but this is one that I figured among my collection of 100 hats I don't wear, I'm not going to wear this one either. So I had no idea who gave it to me. It was just sitting on my desk. So I turned around and gave it to somebody on my staff. I said, does anybody want this hat? Now, I know at some point that's going to get reported. But the question I had is, number one, if we had a gift ban, would that have violated it? But number two is, how do I find out who gave me the hat? Because it was just laying on my desk. So those are some of the things that you have to figure out in this whole process. It's never cut and dry. I mean, you've got to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We want to have the process as open and as transparent as possible. We don't want to make it a gotcha system where one party can go after the other party for, you know, when they put down a contribution, putting down the wrong address accidentally. You don't want that. You want to make the system open. You want to make it fair and transparent so that the voters can ultimately look at it and say whether they think somebody's doing something wrong or something right.
I understand Representative Kidd introduced a bill that would require the legislators to report meals. Do you think that would make any dramatic change?
Haven't thought of that one. But I'll be glad to look at it, but that's just not one I've thought about.
Do you think that the recent Supreme Court decision will have any effect at the state level when it comes to putting together either limits on campaign contributions or anything like that?
You know, all I've read is the headlines on that, and I know it dealt with the federal level in corporate giving. So I don't suspect it will have any impact at the state level.
What do you think the climate is in the Senate for the 1.5% hospital providers fee proposal?
There is some concern. Anytime you have a measure that raises additional revenue, there is some concern. I think that with the budget situation as it is, I think most senators are saying, well, we haven't digested this yet. We're not going to absolutely say no. But we're certainly not going to say yes at this point, but we're going to look at all the facts and see where we are. But I know that there has been some concern expressed about that.